Good day, and today we're going to learn about the rules of capitalization in English. So there are several rules to learn when you are capitalizing, when you're making complete sentences, looking for proper nouns. So we're going to go through most of the generalized rules. For example, rule number 1, you want to capitalize the first word of every sentence. You can see in my example, before Jennifer went to school, she walked her dog, and he loved to go for walks daily. My two complete sentences do not have capital letters in them. So the correct version would be capital B in before Jennifer went to school, she walked her dog. And then you also need to capitalize the H in the second sentence. He loved to go for walks daily. Now note when you see in poetry the first word of each line is going to be traditionally capitalized, but some modern poets might not adhere to this. But either way, when citing poetry, perhaps in an essay for example, make sure to use the capital letters exactly how they are used in the particular work. So you might see this capitalized rule not exactly happening in modern poetry, but every place else, please capitalize the first word in every sentence. Rule number 2, you should capitalize the pronoun I, and you should also capitalize the interjection O. For example, you can see in my sentence, she and I decided to go for a run after school. The pronoun I needs to be capitalized. She and I decided to go for a run after school. That pronoun I is standing in place of your name. And if your name was in there, it would be capitalized. You may only see the interjection O in poetry. It is not that common use for English language anymore. So if you see it being used, for example, in Walt Whitman's "O Captain, My Captain," or perhaps you might see it in very old literature like a translation of Homer's "Tell Me, O Muse," if you see the O standing separate as an interjection, that should be capitalized. Rule number 3. You should capitalize proper nouns, and you should capitalize proper adjectives. For example, we have the name Princess Kate. She happens to be from England. And you also have another example of, perhaps in Shakespeare's time, Elizabethan drama. Or you might be seeing in current events about the Syrian border. Now, Princess Kate would have a capital K on it, that's her name, but she also has a proper title, so you need to capitalize both the title Princess and her name Kate. You also need to capitalize the word England, the country that she's from. However, when you're looking at proper adjectives, you only need to capitalize the adjective that makes that particular noun specific. For example, Elizabethan drama. The word drama does not need to be capitalized. Leave that noun alone. But the proper adjective, the word Elizabethan, makes it specific to a certain time period. Therefore, you're going to capitalize Elizabethan, but not the word drama. The word border in Syrian border, the noun gets to stay uncapitalized, but because you're talking about a specific country's border, please capitalize the S in Syrian for the Syrian border. That is a proper adjective. Rule number 4, you should capitalize the names of people. Whether they're their first names or their last names, their surnames, you should be capitalizing everybody's name. For example, if their name is Karen, Mark, Phoebe, any first names that you have, maybe Lander, Soto, McGuire, if they're the last names, you should be capitalizing first and last names. Rule number 5, you should be capitalizing geographical names. So for example, if you've got cities, you should be capitalizing every word that is making up that city's name. Most city names have just the one word, such as Orlando or Austin, but sometimes you're going to have multiple words in a name, like San Diego. Guess what? They both get capital letters. If it's a county or a township, they're still proper names. Every word should be capitalized. Cook County, Lexington Township. Notice every word gets a capital letter. States, Hawaii, Georgia, Maine, New Hampshire, that happens to have 2 words. Every state name gets a capitalized letter. Regions of the country as well, such as New England, the North, the Midwest. Now notice I did not capitalize the words the. That is not part of the region. You would call it North. I'm going North. The United States of America, Canada, Scotland, country names should be capitalized. Again, as you notice with one-word names such as Canada and Scotland, fairly easy to figure out. Please capitalize those. But if you have multiple words, such as the United Federation of Russia, the United States of America, the actual nouns and adjectives are proper nouns and proper adjectives. Those need capitalizing. Once again, my word the is not needed as a capital letter. Continents certainly should be capitalized: Asia, Europe, and Australia. Island names plus the word island or isle should also be capitalized because, again, that's part of their names. The Isle of Palms, the Philippine Islands. Mountains should also be capitalized. If it's called perhaps Mount Rainier, you need to give a capital letter to the M in Mount Rainier. The Alps, we do like to call them the Alps. Please do not capitalize the. However, Alps is a proper noun. Please give it its proper capital letter. Bodies of water should also be capitalized, such as the Pacific Ocean or perhaps the Mississippi River. Roads, highways, and streets also need capital letters. Route 66, the New Jersey Turnpike, Rodeo Drive, even just 45th Street in your town. Everything needs a capital letter. Parks as well, such as Yellowstone National Park, Cleveland National Forest. Every word in those proper nouns needs to have capital letters. Rule number 6 for capitalization: you should capitalize the names of businesses, institutions, organizations, and government bodies. For example, General Electric, GE, is a name of a corporation. It's the name of a business. Therefore, you should capitalize every word in the name of the corporation. An organization like the National Football League, the NFL, the National Basketball Association, the NBA, they also get their due capital letters. An institution such as St. Mary's Hospital, again, it needs to have all of its capital letters. That is their title of their building. That is the title of their campus. And of course, the school you're probably sitting in, or maybe perhaps ones in your school district, such as Jackson High School, every word needs to be capitalized. Rule number 7, you should capitalize the name of historical time periods, of events, of special events, and of calendar holidays. For example, when you study the historical time period World War II, you should capitalize world and war. After all, that is talking about a specific time period in history. If there are special events taking place perhaps in your town or your city, such as the Nike track and field competition, every proper noun and proper adjective needs to have their capital letter. You'll notice I didn't capitalize and, but everything else, the nouns and the adjectives, are getting capital letters. Or a calendar holiday, such as Christmas, Mother's Day, and Father's Day. The words need to have capital letters. They have proper nouns and proper adjectives in them. Capitalization rule number 8, you should capitalize the names of monuments, awards, ships, planets, buildings, or just straight up generalized awards. For example, the monument, the Vietnam War Memorial. If you have memorial buildings or memorial monuments within your city, they should get capital letters on all of their proper nouns and adjectives. Perhaps the name of a ship, such as the Discovery or the Titanic. Again, we're not going to capitalize the article, the word the in front of them, because that's not part of their names. But the boat's name was Titanic. The spaceship's name is Discovery, so they get capital letters. Your planets, such as Earth, Mars, Saturn, they all get capital letters. Buildings, if they are named after certain people, certain organizations, once again, they need to have capital letters, such as the Rockefeller Center in New York City. Or if you have specific awards, such as the Medal of Honor, with the proper adjectives and the proper nouns, they also deserve their capitalization. Rule number 9, you should capitalize nationalities, races, and religions. If you're talking about a specific group of people by giving them a name, you should give them their proper capitalization. If you are trying to tell somebody that you are an American, you are labeling yourself, you are giving yourself a name, and because that is a name, you are going to capitalize the A in American or the C in Chinese. Same thing with races. For Caucasian and Hispanic, once again, you are giving yourself a name, you are labeling, therefore give them their capital letters. Same thing with religions, Christianity, Buddhism, Muslim, Islam. You're giving yourself a label, you're giving yourself a name, therefore these words should be capitalized when you are labeling. Rule number 10, you should capitalize brand names of products. A lot of times you might hear people say, when you're using tissue, that you're going to be using a Kleenex, or when you are making copies of something, you are Xeroxing. If you're using the name of an actual brand name of a product, it should be capitalized. If you are using a Kleenex, you need to use a capital K. If you are Xeroxing something, you should be using an X. If you're eating Cheerios, there's a capital C. Rule number 11 for capitalization, do not capitalize names of school subjects except for languages, and of course, offerings that include a number. So now we're getting into when do we capitalize and when do we not. For example, if you're studying the English language or the Spanish language, you are labeling a certain type of people, you are labeling a country, so those should get capital letters. However, if it's a school subject that does not label a particular type of people, such as algebra or government, do not capitalize those school subjects. Now, there is a little bit of a difference here when you're talking about maybe perhaps college courses where there are course offerings that include a number in the name. For example, World History 200, you will see that colleges and universities do actually capitalize those course names. So if there happens to be a course offering number, you should probably capitalize the words. And rule number 12, capitalize titles of people when they come before a name. For example, if you are going to go see your local general practitioner, you probably call them Dr. Bassett. Therefore, you should, as a name, give the doctor a proper capital letter D. Principal Ames in your school, if you are going to be calling them by their title principal, you should give that a capital letter P. If you're calling somebody by their formal name, Mrs. Simpson, the Mrs. in her name is going to have a capital M. Professor Pham is being called professor, therefore is part of his name, therefore you should give him a capital letter P. President Kennedy would have a capital P for president. That would become part of his formal title and therefore part of his name. Rule number 13 asks you to capitalize titles of people used on their own or if after a name, if it refers to a high official. For example, if you are going to say Charles the Prince of Wales, you are going to capitalize that title. Perhaps if you were talking about the President of the United States, you are going to capitalize the letter P in President. Or the United States Secretary of State. Every word in that official title gets a capital letters. So if they're being used on their own, the President said this, the Secretary of State said that, they should get capitalization rules as well. And rule number 14, capitalize words that show family relations when used as a part of their name, but not with a possessive. For example, if it becomes part of their name, if you're going to call her Aunt Jenny, if you're going to call him Uncle Jim, if you're going to call her Grandma Sarah, you are going to capitalize those words before their names. It has now become part of their name. When you do not capitalize the words of family relations, you're going to be using them more as a possessive. For example, when you say your sister Fawn, you're not using the word sister as a part of her name. When you say my father, well, father is not being used as part of his name, so do not capitalize it. Bob's brother, please capitalize Bob, that is a formal name. But when you say Bob's brother, you're not using the term brother as an actual label, as a name. So do not capitalize brother in this case. Now, if a family relationship is referred to only by their title, you may choose to capitalize it. Again, this all depends on how the word is being used. If you're talking about my mom, your mom, that is not capitalized. But if you see it being used in reference as a name, like you are directly addressing your mother, you're saying mom right to the person's face, that is their name. Please give them the appropriate title by capitalizing it. So be careful with capitalizing words that show family relations. If it is labeling somebody, it should be capitalized. If it is not directly labeling the person, it should not be capitalized. And rule number 15 is to capitalize the first and last words in titles of novels, stories, magazines, poems, articles, movies, paintings, and any other artistic work. And as you can see, I've got examples for each of those here. Now, some of the words are not going to be capitalized because they are not proper nouns and they're not proper adjectives. For example, in your novel To Kill a Mockingbird, you'll notice the A is not capitalized, but everything else is. And that's because they are proper nouns and proper adjectives. A is an article being used in this instance, and it is not the first word in the title. So we're going to capitalize every first letter of a title, such as To Kill a Mockingbird, The Mask of the Red Death, The Red Wheelbarrow, Back to the Future. Every first word gets a capital letter. Your proper nouns and your proper adjectives also get capitalized. For example, in The Mask of the Red Death, you are capitalizing the first word the because it's the first word. You're also capitalizing mask and death because they're proper nouns. And you're capitalizing red because it's a proper adjective. You are not capitalizing of the in the middle of that title because they are not proper adjectives and proper nouns, and they're not at the beginning of the title. The only time this might become interesting is if you look at my example for the newspaper. I have the New York Times. Well, New York Times is the title of the newspaper, so we're going to capitalize New York Times. Now, when you formally speak of a newspaper, you have a tendency to throw the word the before it. If I spoke of the New York Times as a newspaper. The, once again, is an article. It is not a noun. It is not an adjective. And it is not a proper part of the name of the newspaper. Therefore, it would not get a capital letter. And rule number 16, capitalize the words that refer to deities. If you are talking specifically about God, about Buddha, about Zeus, those are labeled as names, and because those are names, they get capitalization. Now, when you're using the word God and goddess in reference to mythology, you're not using it specifically as a name to label someone. Those are not capitalized. If you're talking about the gods and goddesses of Greek and Roman mythology, you haven't specifically named a god or a goddess, so those should not be capitalized. If you're talking about Allah, if you're talking about Zeus, then you should capitalize the words because you're referring to a specific deity. Now, lastly, we can talk about unnecessary capitals. Unnecessary capital letters distract the reader and are not only incorrect, but they seemingly give equal status to words that should be capitalized. For example, you might say, I read a newspaper called the Miami Herald while I'm on vacation in Florida. Well, the Miami Herald is going to be a proper noun and adjective because that's the title of a newspaper. And you also have a proper noun for the state of Florida. And of course, we want to capitalize the very first word in the sentence, I, but that's all you need. When you just have the word newspaper, we don't have it being labeled at that time in the sentence. Do not capitalize it. Do not capitalize the word vacation in this instance. Vacation is a noun, but it is not referencing any specific type of vacation in historical reference. So what have we learned? In order to avoid unnecessary capital letters, one must learn the letters of proper capitalization as outlined in the previous slides and lessons. Thank you so much for stopping by to learn about capitalization. If you'd like to learn more about parts of speech, or if you'd like to continue working on what are proper nouns and proper adjectives, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what else you'd like to learn. And as always, I appreciate it if you subscribed. Take care.